Okay, the first power rankings of the year, and again, I do consider these the first. I went just based on where I think everybody's at right now, and I feel okay because TSN did this today too. So I was like, all right, I'm not the only one doing this. People want to get mad, they get mad at TSN too, and just going based on where teams are situated now compared to where they were at the end of last year, looking at expectations and things of that nature. And I think this is going to be a very interesting year. Now, that being said, this board does not measure who I necessarily think will be the best team at the end of the year. That's something completely different, and that's something that sometimes gets lost in the power rankings. The idea that your number one in the power rankings should just be the best team in the league, and that's it. And I think power rankings is more along the lines of momentum, which team looks like they're going to start out of the gate as the best team, and which one you're thinking is in the best position right now. Number 31 on the list, Vancouver. And I really debated about this. I will say this. Getting rid of Sam Gagner, waiving Sam Gagner is fantastic. It is a promise that Benning had during the summer, which was the best players will make the roster. And he doesn't care if they're veterans or not. So Tyler Mott making the roster and Gagner getting cut is him living up to that word. And people can say, well, the Gagner contract was a mistake. Right. So he's trying to get out of that mistake. I will say whether you're right or you're wrong, being willing to admit that you made that mistake sooner rather than later is to your benefit. Number 30 is Ottawa. They didn't have a tremendous preseason, and there's not a lot of expectation about them this year being very good. And of course, what's interesting with Ottawa is that number one draft pick doesn't belong to them. It's not theirs. So the first rounder still could end up being Jack Hughes going to Colorado. Number 29, Rangers. I know they had a decent preseason. I have some concerns about them going into the year. This being said, don't be surprised if by the fall, not this Saturday obviously, but the Saturday after when I do my first during the season power rankings, if these guys have moved up a bunch. It's possible. And people have been asking about my prediction on the standings. Well, I already did that about a month ago, but I can do like a refresher tomorrow. I've got a board that's all set up for that, and I'll discuss that again. This isn't a predictor of the standings. Number 28, Montreal. I had Montreal at 29. I bumped them up because I think Kotkaniemi making the team is a benefit to them. And we'll see if Max Domi ends up making it actually better. We haven't seen what Max Domi can do due to his suspension. But I do think that Montreal could end up being a little bit better. So I bumped them ahead of the New York Rangers. It's the difference between 29th and 28th. And we'll see if they move up once the season gets going. Number 27, I have Detroit. The Red Wings, I bumped down because, Veleno doesn't make it, Zadina doesn't make it, and, Cholowski made it, which is good, but there's a lot of question marks with the Detroit roster. I had them at 25, and I bumped them down to 27 when I looked over the numbers. I still think there's potential there. Look, they're ahead of 4 other teams. I'm not saying they're awful. There's a lot of publications that said they'll be in the bottom 3 this year. That may end up being the case, but I think they're in good shape right now. Number 26, Arizona. Arizona had a decent preseason, but I still have a lot of concerns with Arizona. And there's a lot of youth in this lineup, and there's a question of whether or not Antti Raanta can follow up last year and the tremendous second half he had, especially, where he was fantastic. And they were one of the best teams in the league after, I think, February 14th last year. Can they follow that up? Or do they end up digging themselves into not a hole like last year? That's not going to happen again, I don't think. But we'll see what ends up happening. Number 25, I know, Carolina had a good preseason. That being said, there's a lot of rookies. Rookies will usually start out really well, and then around game 50 during a season, they may fall off in terms of their production. It is not a sign that they're bad players. It is not a sign that it's all going to fall apart. It's that rookie wall. And I'm wondering just how much that's going to affect Anaheim or Carolina this year. And if Sebastian Aho is the number one center, how is he going to perform over a full season at that spot? Number 24, Islanders. The Islanders had a better preseason than I think anybody had expected. And I think the Islanders are going to be better than people might expect with the loss of John Tavares. I think, who has now become Tavares again in Toronto. But that being said, I think the Islanders will be competitive. I think with Barry Trotz behind the bench and with Lou Lamoriello making the management decisions, I think things are going to get a lot better for the Islanders in the long term. For this year, pretty good. I do wonder if Lou, if things look like they're turning ugly around the halfway mark of the year, do you sell off and hope that you get Jack Hughes as a number one overall player? Worked with Matthews in Toronto, so I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I do think the Islanders will be competitive out of the gate. Number 23, and I went back and forth on these guys. I expect Buffalo to do well. Buffalo, again, you've got Dahlin, you've got Middlestad, and a question mark about how they'll do over a full 82-game schedule. Then you have the goaltending with Ullmark and Hutton, and the question mark of which one emerges as a starter and how will they do over a full season in the NHL. Because Hutton's never been a starter, and Ullmark hasn't spent a full season in the NHL as a starter. So for those question marks, I have them at 23. I have them ahead of a bunch of teams right now because I anticipate them starting well. I think they'll start relatively well. They had a 3-4 preseason, which isn't bad. It's not awful. 22, Chicago. I actually had Chicago lower than that. I had Chicago at 24. I bumped them up because it does look like, and I'm being cautious in this, that Corey Crawford is on his way back. But when? Taking part in practice today means he's able to practice. Doesn't mean he's ready to play in a game. There's it's completely different between the two. Ask Allen Iverson about the difference between practice and a game. He'll tell you. 22 is where I have Chicago until we see Crawford in net full time, and until we know, is Duncan Keith on his way down, or is Duncan Keith going to rebound from what was a down year for him statistically last year? At 21, Minnesota. What is Minnesota? And middling preseason, middling results for Eric Stahl in the preseason. Did Eric Stahl have a career year late in his career? Probably. Is there going to be enough offense is kind of the question with Minnesota. And then Wild fans complain a lot about Devin Dubnyk. Well, okay, if Dubnyk's below average and if there are holes in this lineup up front, Minnesota probably falls out of the playoffs. That's likely. Highly likely. Number 20, I have the Oilers. And I know they had a very good preseason. They had a very good preseason last year. And I have some concerns with Edmonton based on... And I'll say this. There was talk about the Oilers waiving Montoya and keeping Koskinen. After that happened, we found out there was a clause in Koskinen's contract. He has a no-movement clause. They couldn't have sent him to the American League even if they wanted to. So there's some question marks about the Oilers, and it'll be really interesting to see how it works out for them, especially early in the year. How ready is Evan Bouchard? And can Yamamoto and Ratty manage to maintain that top 6 production over a regular season this year? Now Ratty's got the expectation. He had an excellent preseason. He was fantastic. But when the games start to matter, will it make a difference? Sometimes it does. 19, I have Anaheim. Ducks fans are concerned, and I agree. I do. You got Perry out now, extended period of time. Kessler, there's no question, or there's questions about what kind of shape Kessler's in. Will he come back? When's he coming back? He's skating now again. He's practicing. There's still no timeline that I know of for him coming back. And then it's a matter of they're giving the reins over to rookies, and there's always some danger when you give the reins over to young kids that they'll struggle. They're going to make rookie mistakes, which is why they're called rookie mistakes, which is why I have Anaheim at 18 or at 19. At 18, I have Dallas. I don't know. Dallas in the preseason, I like what Heiskanen did. I certainly like what Hintz did, but I'm still not convinced. And it's the Dallas Stars fan in me that is not convinced of where Dallas is right now. I want to be convinced. I want to believe. But I'm having trouble believing. We'll see where things end up for Dallas this year. Is Dallas going to be inside or outside of the playoffs? I think they're going to make it. Spoiler alert, I do think they're going to make it, but I'm doubtful about them right now. At 17, I have Calgary. The Flames had a decent preseason. Dubé looks like he may be a keeper. He did slow down as the preseason went along. We'll see what happens when the games are important, when it's regular season, and how that turns out for him. But, Calgary, I think part of it is when you look at the strength of who they were against in the preseason. When you look at the Canucks they were playing, the Canucks were just, the 31st for a reason. So we'll see. But I think Calgary could very well be close. And we'll get into that tomorrow when I get into my actual season predictions. Number 16, I have Florida. Florida somewhat discouraged me in preseason. I kind of expected a little bit of a better preseason. I kind of expected a little more out of Borgstrom. Again, when the games are important, we'll see what happens. We'll see where Luongo ends up. I'm concerned about Luongo over a full season. I'm concerned about him having one of those down Octobers. So, again, we'll see where that ends up for him. Number 15, I have Columbus. Panarin had a very good preseason. Bobrovsky is a gamer. I expect him to play very well. That being said, there's a lot of question marks about Columbus. And teams around them in the division, I think, are very motivated. We'll see how motivated Columbus is. One benefit to them is that both Panarin and Bobrovsky are in contract years. Guys usually do very, very well in their contract years. So that should work to their benefit. Number 14, Jersey. New Jersey played SC Bern today. European ice means the game's completely different, so I don't read a whole lot into the results there. European ice is really totally different. And during the game, they even talked about the fact that the neutral zone trap is still alive and well in the Swiss and European leagues, just based on the ice surface alone, which for people who say, the NHL should go to a larger ice surface, that might be an argument against it. But Jersey, I think, is one of those middle-of-the-road teams. We'll see where they end up during the regular season, what kind of start they get off to. Is Kincaid going to maintain that momentum from last season, or do they need Schneider in the net as the number one? Number 13, Philly. Some very solid rookie performances in the preseason. Again, we have to wait and see if they carry over into the regular. Does Giroux build on last year? Does he equal last year, or does he fall back? Odds are he falls back. But I still have Philly at 13 right now. I have some goaltending concerns, but I thought Elliott played well in the game against the Bruins I watched, so maybe he's in regular season form. And Elliott has been one of the best goalies in the league at times over the last half decade, where he'll just be fantastic, and then he's middling, then he's fantastic. Maybe they're on the fantastic side of things. Number 12, I have Colorado. Up and down preseason. I reported earlier today they got 11 goals. I had wondered about that total. The site I was looking at, it's really hard to find sites that actually track preseason. TSN doesn't. Sportsnet doesn't. So I was going by CBS. They missed the 6-goal game that Colorado had. So they were all the games from last night. But honestly, I do have some concerns about Colorado. And even while they're 12th, we'll see where they end up come this season. But I do think they should get off to a good start, especially if there's still a lot of motivation for a certain McKinnon guy to prove that last year wasn't a fluke. Number 11, I have the Kings. And the Kings, it's tough because they have all of the pieces necessary, but some of those pieces are old. By NHL standards now, they are above the age line of most other teams. And I have tremendous concern about them going into this year. So they're at 11, but it's barely. I had them higher than this. And I had to bump them down because I'm like, I can't have them that high. Kovalchuk, either it's going to look brilliant a year from now, or it's going to look really foolish a year from now. So it's going to be interesting to see where that ends up, because they got a lot of money tied up in them, and they have no money to fix anything should they get off to a slow start this season. Number 10, St. Louis. No team did more in the offseason, I thought, to get themselves back into the hunt than St. Louis. Buffalo did a lot as well, but honestly, St. Louis made a lot of noise in the offseason, and I think their fans are rightfully excited right now. And if Allen can play like we know Jake Allen can play, there's no reason that they can't be both in the playoffs and contending. Number 9, I actually have Pittsburgh at number 9. I'm curious with Pittsburgh because they go out in the second round last year, but it would be real easy for me to say, well, they lost to the Stanley Cup champions. They won the Stanley Cup twice in a row before that. Realistically, they should be 3 or 4, but there are teams that look like they've passed them. And Pittsburgh needs to get off to a fast start this year. Remember, Pittsburgh at the halfway mark last year looked like they might miss the playoffs. There was a lot of us, myself included, thought, wow, Pittsburgh's going to miss the playoffs. They didn't, but it was closer than it really probably should have been to them actually missing the playoffs. Number 8, Boston. I thought Boston looked good during the preseason. Torrey Krug is out. I have some concern with that. There's a lot to process with Boston, and I still think that they're probably going to get off to a fast start. We'll see what happens over a full season, because these power rankings are going to change a lot, and odds are whoever's ruling this chart at the end of October is not going to be at the end there at the top at the end of March. Number 7, Nashville. Yep, Nashville. I thought this offseason, I thought they kept everything together. Things still look good, but I still think there are certain teams that are ahead of them when it comes to momentum, especially at number 6 where I've got Vegas. Vegas had an amazing preseason and, outscored opponents 32-15 altogether. I had 28-14 on the chart I did earlier today, but 32-15. Either way, it's a very impressive preseason for Vegas. Vegas fans are rightfully excited about the upcoming season and the hopes that what they did getting to the finals last year is just a precursor to something even better than making the Stanley Cup finals. Now, I'm not making that prediction. I've not made that prediction. And when you see my predictions tomorrow, I don't see Vegas getting to the Stanley Cup finals again, but I do see them being a very good team. Adding Pacioretty, adding Stastny, keeping everything together. For the most part, they lose Neal, they lose Perron, but I think they've actually upgraded their attack, which is scary. Yes, losing Nate Schmidt for the first 20 games will hurt, but I think with the way they play their team defense, I think they'll be able to absorb that loss. Number 5, I have Winnipeg. And it's funny because a lot of pundits have Winnipeg winning the Stanley Cup, and I don't see any reason why they won't. But right now, with where they're at, I have them at 5th. We're a couple of games for Hellebuck there, and again, it's preseason, so people rightfully will take issue with me saying it. But I think Hellebuck, I think it's going to take him a bit to really get into mid-season form. Might have a bit of a slow October. That happens again because goal scoring is usually higher in October than the rest of the season, anyways. But and again, they're 5th. Shouldn't have to qualify it, but I do. It's kind of what happens when I do these, right? Turns into, by about week 5, I'm just apologizing as soon as I put any team up past about 10th. I'm just apologizing for where everybody lands. Number 4, Washington. Capitals are defending Stanley Cup champions. I had them at number 1 during the entire summer. I've dropped them to number 4. I will not drop them further than that on the eve of the season because, again, they're the defending Stanley Cup champions. I don't think they've lost anything from that Stanley Cup win. And there's a motivation. I love that Alex Ovechkin said, basically, don't suck 2 years in a row. That's their plan. That's their motto. And I think it's pretty funny stuff. Number 3, San Jose. I have some concern about them coming out of the gate. I don't know that Erik Karlsson's had enough time with his new teammates. I don't know. I'm concerned that maybe there might be some miscommunications off the hop, and San Jose may struggle a bit out of the gate, but we'll see. I do still have them at 3 because, honestly, Karlsson and Burns on that blue line. Thornton comes back for 1 more year, and you've still got pretty solid forward depth, pretty decent goaltending, and that defense core is intimidating. Number 2, Toronto. Yep. They had an excellent preseason. The excitement in Toronto is really high. Even though they don't have Willie Nylander, they don't really need Willie Nylander. And that's scary. It's scary when a top 6 winger can be holding out and your reaction is, well, I don't really need him. Now, I'm not saying that Ennis is a top 6 winger. Not over a full season. But so far it's looked like he can fill in. And that's really all you need because Nylander eventually will come to terms with Toronto. It's just a matter for how much. Which means, number 1, is Tampa. Yeah, I know. Game 7 against Washington is another game where Stamkos could have stepped up and cemented his legacy as one of the greats, and he wasn't able to do it. But neither could anybody in Tampa. And, the Lightning are in the midst of a bit of a change, going to Brisebois as the GM instead of Yzerman. I don't think that's going to hurt them. I'm intimidated by what Tampa can put out on the ice. I think Sergachev is going to get better. I think Vasilevsky is going to get better. And I think that there's a lot of young guys in this lineup that are just going to be intimidating to play against. So keep an eye on them. Again, there's nothing scientific with this. And this will change between now and the next time you see it, which will be not this coming Saturday, but the Saturday after. For people who come in late. Always people who come in late. And they just have to just wreck it. So, see, the Capitals aren't going to repeat, so that's why I have them at 31st. Now, people are going to have a problem with the Canucks being at 4, and I get that. But I really think that Pettersson's 100-point rookie season is going to help glaze things over. Not only that, but Edler is overdue for a Norris Trophy. And if the Oilers don't beat the Flyers in the Stanley Cup this year, I'd be very, very surprised. I think that Talbot wins the Vezina, and I think that Brian Elliott is due for a save percentage of around .941 this year. That being said, Minnesota is going to be intimidating. They should absolutely win their division going away. And for that reason, I know these power rankings are going to be very controversial, but, that's kind of why I put these out here. The Leafs I have at 13th because, I hate Toronto. So I have to have the Leafs at 13 because, I hate them. And that's just kind of the way that... And Tampa's at 21 because that logo's terrible. So I have to have them at 20. That's just the way that works. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through and you just happen upon this video. And again, I understand the Capitals being at 31st may surprise people, but what can I do? It's just... I explained this the whole way through the video, so if you just fast forwarded to the end to find out why, you missed why Washington's 31st. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.